So can you hear me now? Okay, awesome. So I run Amazon ElastiCache service, which is basically managed Redis and Memcache. Also Amazon Elasticsearch service, which is managed Elasticsearch and best known for the ELK stack. And Neptune, which is our new upcoming graph database. Just a bit about myself. I'm a longtime open source contributor. I'm one of the co-creators of PHP. So basically wrote the virtual machine inside of the PHP engine. And I'm still part of the PHP group. Also was part of the Apache Software Foundation, the Eclipse Board of Directors, and have started a number of open source projects with a lot of different licenses. So I'll be talking today a lot about open source, how we think about open source at AWS, and then also talk about some acceleration of contributions we plan to make to Redis. I also contributed to MySQL. How many of you have used MySQL? Okay, how many of you have used the MySQL client? So the awesome feature I contributed there is actually the autocomplete feature in the MySQL client, which has saved people, many years of work. But it's kind of the tiny contribution that I think happened in like 1997, and it is still in the source code today that Oracle ships. So never signed a contributor license agreement, but I guess it's not in the core server, so that was fine. So let's talk a bit about open source at AWS. So obviously the cloud is built on open source. We use a huge amount of open source as part of building AWS. And I think, the way we think about open source is it's a huge enabler, right, to building these platforms. Generally speaking, not only do we build on it, but we also, we listen to our customers, we see what our customers use, and then based on that, if we think we can, give a better security experience, better management experience, and so on, we may also go and manage that open source for our customers. And when do we do kind of managed open source versus, doing more of a purpose-built approach? That really depends on, I would say, both the state of the problem we're trying to solve for customers and the state of open source. So for example, when we built ECS, the Elastic Container Service, right, Kubernetes wasn't really out there. We knew there was this problem we needed to solve, and we built that. And then, later on as Kubernetes came out, right, we announced that we're also going to embrace Kubernetes because our customers wanted it, and we did that. So at the end of the day, really our decisions are made based on what our customers ask us to do. And sometimes that means that there's good open source out there that can solve the problem, and sometimes we need to build it ourselves. I'll talk in a second about how we think about contributions, but I'd say generally speaking, there's a lot of desire and interest to contribute to open source inside of AWS. I think one of the problems that I've seen since being there in the past 2 years is sometimes when we go and build something like this, we build it at large scale. There are huge control planes, behind these. And we kind of purpose-built the software in a way where it starts to become not very interesting if we were open sourcing it because people couldn't actually consume it. And so I think, part of the shift that, we've been doing, and I've definitely done in my teams in Elasticsearch and ElastiCache, is trying to think about that up front and then build some of these capabilities in a way where we abstract some of the interfaces and the adapters and makes it actually easier for us to then go in open source and make it also convenient and valuable to people who want to run these things on premise or want to run it in other clouds. And so I think you're going to see you see more and more of that happening. For example, just recently, we made a pretty significant contribution to Elasticsearch, where we basically enabled resharding at a much greater scale than what it could do before. And so just kind of thinking about that up front, I think ultimately helps us build things in a way that actually enables us to contribute more directly. If we think about open source at AWS and Amazon, these are some of the projects that we contributed to in 2016. And just so you kind of see the pace of change and in open source contribution, open source velocity, this is 2017. And so, we have hired a lot of folks who are basically helping us, be a bridge into the open source community. We're enabling and empowering developers more to make these contributions. And so you're going to see more and more, I would say, from Amazon in really making sure we don't only, use the great open source community from a source code perspective to build the cloud, but really try and accelerate giving back improvements that we make on our customers' behalf to the open source software. If you want to find out a bit more about the kind of projects that both we've started and contributed to, you can go to aws.github.io. We have over 800 projects there. And we try and keep this as up to date. And we also have an open source blog where we actually publish a lot of the work that we're doing. Just talking a bit about ElastiCache. So ElastiCache is basically our managed Redis and Memcache. I think the most important piece about this is, we try and take the undifferentiated heavy lifting that customers need to do in running their own clouds, running their own environments from a security, compliance perspective, availability and scale, and basically do that, take care of that for customers. We have a very large customer base on ElastiCache, and I think what is really helpful to us is learning from those customers and seeing what they're trying to do, and then go and really solve those problems for them. So when we at Amazon talk about being customer obsessed and customer centric, that's really how we operate. It's not just lip service. We listen to our customers on a day-to-day basis, and we're probably not very strategic as a company. I would say we are very customer focused, and so what we hear from our customers, that's what we really focus on, and we try and solve those problems. And sometimes solving those problems is extending open source projects, sometimes it's doing building purpose-built software, or sometimes it's just integrating and managing these environments for our customers in a better, easier to consume way. So as far as the team itself, and some of the engineers are actually here, we've made some of what I will call kind of modest contributions to Redis in the past. I mean, we've been involved in a number of patches that we've contributed. We've opened bugs with root causing and really trying to help kind of harden the Redis environment. But we really haven't made a lot of, what I would call big contributions. And part of that has just been that kind of, the first years of the service has really been focused on the control plane and really making sure we nail security, we nail availability, reliability, and scale. But now as we're, the more time we spend with our customers, the more we see that also extending and hardening Redis itself is very, very important. And so, what you're going to see really going forward is, more and more of those contributions, being given back to Redis itself. The thing I wanted to talk about today is a very significant contribution that we basically opened a PR request for that about a week or two ago, and that is encryption in transit. So as we've been spending more and more time with our customers, financial service customers who need, compliance, whether it's HIPAA or FedRAMP or PCI, lack of encryption in transit has really been holding back a lot of workloads from Redis. And so, the first thing we did is we said, okay, let's go and solve that customer problem. But this time we were very thoughtful as we were, solving this problem, is saying, why don't we build it in a way that also makes it easier for us to actually give this back to the Redis community? As I said before, if we just go and build this thing, just thinking about our environment and how it runs within our system, right, it probably wouldn't be a valuable piece of source code because it wouldn't run in anyone else's environment. So the team here actually took more time than it would take to add this feature just for our service, and really try to generalize the implementation in a way that this could serve the larger Redis community. And I kind of think about this in two ways. One is, giving back to the community. We are benefiting from all the work that the community is doing on Redis itself, and we do want to make sure that we are also giving back when we make these enhancements. And I think the second thing is also, as we think about enterprise adoption for Redis, there's a real opportunity, in my opinion, to accelerate Redis adoption. I mean, Redis is, very broadly used, but there's breadth and there's depth. And I think when we think about the hardcore use cases around financial services and other areas, we do see adopters, but I think we can do better. And so the way we were thinking about this also is, if we can deliver this and put it out there, then we can enable any enterprise customer, whether it's our customer or some other cloud's customer on-premise, to really use Redis as a mission-critical, highly compliant piece of software. So what that really entails, encryption in transit, is a number of things. First of all, client-to-server encryption. So from your Redis client. And most Redis clients today actually support encryption, so you don't have to change your application source code. You do have to change some configuration to make sure that encryption is actually enabled. The second thing we did was making sure we do intranode encryption. So it doesn't do any good if you just encrypt from client to server. For some things like FedRAMP, you actually need encryption all the way. The only place where you're allowed to be not encrypted is in memory. And so we also added that. And then also very important, but often forgotten, is actually how do you manage the certificates? You got to do certificate rotation. You know, we constantly rotate certificates for our customers to really make sure we meet the security bar of AWS Cloud. And so giving you a zero downtime certificate rotation capability was super important to us. And so those are really the kind of three pieces that are in here. And the contribution hasn't been accepted yet, so it's sitting out there. I know Salvatore was very busy preparing for this conference and his talk, which was pretty awesome, by the way. I'm super excited about streams. And so it's basically up there now. It's a pull request 4855. It's a pretty significant body of work. It's over 3,000 lines of code. We submitted that April 19th. And our lead contributor on that was Matt Olson. And I did want to talk a bit about what's underlying this contribution. So kind of the naive way of building this would have been, hey, let's go and get OpenSSL, use OpenSSL and so on. That's kind of the best known library. But at Amazon, what we've kind of discovered is OpenSSL, has really become a very big body of work. If you've been following it, I would say over the past few years, there have been a number of issues that people have found in OpenSSL. And when you have such a big body of work with so many different contributors, it's just very hard to kind of make sure you have a mean and lean and secure encryption capability. So what we actually ended up doing as Amazon is we built a new encryption library called S2N. S2N is open source. It's under an Apache 2 license, so anyone can use that library. And this library is just focused at the modern encryption standard, so it's super lean, it's high performance, it's gone through formal encryption verification, so it is extremely secure. And I would say as a side bonus, it's also a tiny bit faster than OpenSSL, although I don't think that's the main reason for us doing that. And so this contribution actually builds on S2N. Anyone can use it, Apache 2 license. And it's already very, very well proven. It's basically enabling encryption on Amazon S3, which is probably one of the biggest services that we have at Amazon. And we're super excited to both share kind of the encryption and transit work with the community, but then also build on top of an already existing important open source project for us, which is S2N. So that's really in a nutshell. As I said earlier, we're kind of continuing to think about how we can accelerate contributions. I think the main thing that we have to be conscientious about is making sure that as we build extensions, that we make sure that those extensions can also be valuable outside of an Amazon environment. So, we as a team are definitely putting a lot more thought into, how we do that, and also making sure that developers just have more time to actually take care of it, because getting a feature out quickly, right, is fastest if you just purpose build it for your own environment. So kind of generalizing that does take more investment. I think it could take 50% more investment, but we're definitely willing to give developers that time. And so kind of part of what I'm also doing, I also help evangelize open source inside of AWS itself, is really making sure that it's in our DNA, we give developers more time, And as a result, we can build really awesome open source software that doesn't only benefit our services, but really can benefit customers no matter where they're running, on-premise or in the cloud. So I left 5 minutes for questions. I'm more than happy to take any questions you have.
Could you share the timeline on Redis 4 and module support in AWS ElastiCache?
What was the question?
Could you have any timelines on when you'll have Redis 4 and modules supported in ElastiCache?
Oh yeah, okay. So the question was when are we going to have Redis 4 and module support in ElastiCache? So Redis 4 is definitely something we're working on. I think we're pretty excited about Redis 4. I can't give you exact timelines, as we don't talk about our timelines publicly, mostly because we're always a bit late, because engineering always takes a bit more time. But it is something that we're definitely thinking about. I think as far as modules are concerned, it's also something we're spending time on. We're spending time with customers to really understand, hey, what kind of modules could be interesting to them. I think getting a better sense of that is really important for us. So, in general, there's nothing that really kind of prevents us, right, from supporting certain modules. But I think for us, it's more about hearing from our customers what kind of capabilities and modules will be really valuable to them. We also have the way we also think about it is we think about purpose-built environments at AWS. And I don't think there's a right or a wrong, but I'm less of a one-size-fits-all kind of guy. So we have Amazon Neptune, which I run, which is kind of our purpose-built graph database. And it does certain things like, running 200 billion graphs, really, really well in a highly transactional manner. Elasticsearch, right, which gives us 1.5 petabyte scale today on search indices. And so the way we think about these things is helping customers ultimately build topologies for their application that are purpose-built, highly available, secure, and really awesome at the end of the day. So that's what I'm saying. Like when we work back from the customer, some of these things may end up in modules, or we may say that, hey, maybe there's a certain module that can give us a better glue experience for customers to really bring these purpose-built environments together. I think what you won't see us do, though, as Amazon, is kind of take more of a one-size-fits-all approach to database and analytics. We're heavily kind of focused on purpose-built environments.
Any other questions?
So integrating the SSL and TLS stuff looks interesting. I was curious, are you leveraging that for authentication as well, or is authentication done in a different way?
So okay. So the question was if we also include authentication in this patch. So Redis today has the auth command, and I have to admit I'm not the expert on the auth command in Redis. So what I say may be wrong. I think we made some extension to the auth command to integrate with our kind of security tokens on the back end. That it wouldn't be valuable to anyone for us to open source that because it's just kind of a back end thing. But you could actually for HIPAA and so on, you do need to use auth, you do need to use encryption in transit, and you do need to use encryption at rest. And encryption at rest, any environment you're going to run on, whether it's EC2 or bare metal, is going to give you encryption at rest support.
Maybe walk all the way again.
Get some exercise.
Do you support persistence right now, or you disable persistence?
I can't hear. If you can.
So do you support persistence now?
Do I support what?
Persistence.
Persistence. What do you mean by persistence?
It's like backups. Backups.
Backups? Yeah. So we do support backup experience on ElastiCache. It's a managed backup experience. And, we make it pretty easy for you to manage that.
And do you have anything in the roadmap for cross-region replication?
Okay, the question is, do we have a roadmap for cross-region? If that's something you're interested in, We'd definitely like to hear your feedback on that. I'd say as a general rule of thumb, cross-region is something that's been interesting to AWS customers in general. Right? We just announced multi-region support in DynamoDB, which is a pretty awesome feature, and a lot of people are using it. And so I'd say just at a high level, I think multi-region is interesting. We definitely see use cases for that.
Any other questions?
Great. Well, thanks for coming out.